The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, it's been a couple of days, and I still can't get over Brad Marchand playing for the Florida Panthers. Well, he has not played for them yet, but he did speak to the media. He addressed the situation with him and the Bruins. It's just, I don't, like, before we get to the nuts and bolts of this, like, I know I feel weird seeing it. How do you feel about seeing Brad Marchand actually be in a different uniform than the black and gold we've adjusted ourselves to for the last how many years?
Well, I certainly got a chuckle out of the fact he said the red brings out the color in his eyes. I thought that was a good line. He got it to the podium, said, "Hey, do I have a tan yet?" He had some fun with it, Brad. But I mean, look, it's a weird one because we're not, there's certain athletes that really do come to represent a team, a city. Like, I feel like the way Marchand has played throughout his career made him kind of a prototypical Bruin in a lot of ways. Obviously just spent a long time there with that team. And the team reached a spot where it's looking to clearly, with the five guys they trade away at the deadline, including Marchand, turn over some of its identity, bring in some younger players, start a shift in what it is. And he didn't want to leave. I mean, there's clearly no mystery about that. And so it's just kind of a strange one where a hard decision was made by the organization. I think it's one that some fans may never get in a sense, because I think when you're a fan of a team that had the success the Bruins have, you're accustomed to seeing David Krejci, Patrice Bergeron. They finished their careers as Bruins. Now, it didn't go the same way as Zdeno Chara. You'll recall it's kind of in those pandemic years where things got a bit fuzzy, but he went and played in Washington and then back to Long Island before the end of his career. And so, I guess I would say broadly, it doesn't always end the way you might want to with these kind of relationships. But it's a little strange. And Brad Marchand had limited no trade in his contract. I think it was 8 teams, if I'm not mistaken. The one thing the Bruins did do is they didn't play hardball and trade him somewhere he didn't want to go. I mean, he expressed to them wanting to be down in Florida, and they did make that happen, but obviously didn't get a huge return for him, in part too because he's injured. They traded an injured player who, as you mentioned, still hasn't played for his new team.
Can we go into detail about why the Bruins got to that point where they said, all right, we're going to trade Brad Marchand and trade him to the Florida Panthers?
Sure.
Oh, I was waiting for you to fill in the blank. Sorry. That was my lead in.
Well, I mean, look, he's a pending UFA. He's been such a great value player on the contract he signed. I still remember he signed that 8-year deal that's coming to an expiry after the season during the World Cup in 2016. It was about where Marchand started to take a turn, I would say, in the public's eye. Obviously, at that specific tournament, even the notion back then of him playing for Team Canada would have seemed a bit far-fetched. He ended up playing on Sidney Crosby's line and having a really nice tournament, and signs that deal, and he was paid below market value throughout that contract. Now, that's obviously a decision he made. That's not necessarily anyone's fault. It's the way it goes sometimes, especially when you sign long-term and your career, takes a step up. But I do think he got to this point, and he wanted a 3-year contract, which initially the Bruins, weren't down for. They were trying to keep the term a little shorter. And, I think he still wants to be paid fairly, which is certainly his right to be done. And so, for a long, long time there was a gap in where the two sides saw, what the extension would look like. They did get closer as the deadline got closer. And, it's been discussed a few places now about how Marchand went to the, brokered sort of a meeting with Don Sweeney, the GM of the Bruins, and kind of tried to split the difference, it sounds like. Wanted to, sort of face-to-face, let's cut out the, I'm not saying he was pushing his agent to the side, but it's more just like, let's deal with this and find a conclusion that we're both happy with. And, by that point, I think might have been a little bit late. I think, the Bruins got to a point where they just felt this was the right course of action. Like what's interesting about the Bruins part in this, Julian, is if you look back, there was a press conference there. It was about a month ago, might have been 3.5 weeks ago. Cam Neely spoke, and they spoke of how hard that they were kind of wrestling with this idea that they would be sellers at a deadline. It was not, what they're used to. They kind of showed their work in real time. I think that their thought process, how it was evolving this season, really just wasn't happening. I think they look around, they look at teams like Washington, which was kind of sellers at a deadline just 2 years ago, but, found a way to rebound and get some nice players. And I'm not saying it's going to happen in Boston because they don't have a lot of guys coming. They've obviously picked up some draft capital and things that can help them in that way. They traded for Casey Middlestat, so they got younger player to put in their lineup right now. Fraser Minton too in the deal with Toronto, but they don't want to go to the bottom of the league, but I think that they recognize that there needs to be something done on the fly. And I guess this is where the debate. This is the crux of the debate right here. Brad Marchand is still, even as an injured player, pretty valuable. They got a potential first-round pick for him, assuming the Panthers play 2 rounds of the playoffs and he's healthy to be in those games. And first-round picks are currency in the league, whether you draft a player with them or whether you use them for subsequent trades. Or is it more valuable to keep the guy? And I think that's really where this comes down to. I don't have a strong personal opinion on this one. Like I can see it from both sides.
Sure.
Had the Bruins decided, but it's not a case where I'm on the fence. Like I don't know that. To me, it's logical after the season the Bruins have had to say, look, we got to change some things. We got a really old team here. We're going to miss the playoffs. There's no reason to think you can just roll it back next year at the same group, more or less, that it's going to be better. I think that they got to a point where basically the bill has been due for the way they've run their team. And there's no problem with how they run their team. They won 65 games 2 seasons ago. They've been to 3 cup finals with Marchand on the roster. By any measure, they've been a very successful organization. And it's not hard if you're to take Brad Marchand side of this equation and be like, hey, man, I want to be part of this. We see this playing out. I'm not trying to compare their legacies, but the flip side of this is Sidney Crosby in Pittsburgh, right? Where he's now on a team that's like trying to do this rebuild. Is it going to go fast enough? I think there's still lots of debate about that. Should he still be doing that? We've talked about that side of it on our show lots. Brad Marchand was open to sticking around if he was paid fairly, and it just didn't work out. And so I don't think we should. To me, we should almost get used to this kind of thing in hockey a little bit more. Yeah, I think we're going to see more player movement in a world where there's more money out there for players to make. It's going to be easier in theory to make trades in what's coming in the system with the big cap jumps on the horizon. I think that maybe players are taking different types of contracts more consistently, shorter term deals, maybe in free agency and moving around more. And that's kind of my summation of how it got there. I can see why if you're a hardcore fan though, like that some people are upset just because you didn't want to see Brad Marchand in another jersey. And look, I'll jump to the chase. I would expect at the appropriate time somewhere in the future we're going to be having Brad Marchand number 63 retired in Boston. I think he'll be part of that. Like, I don't think there's any cord severed here, if that makes sense. One interesting thing about Boston is how many former players still live there, right? I don't know if you've seen these alt casts they're doing where Tuukka Rask and Patrice Bergeron,
I saw one a couple weeks ago. Yes,
exactly. But those guys, from a couple years now have been retired. They're still living in the Boston area. I saw Patrice Bergeron in the hallway there after Canada won the Four Nations face-off a couple weeks ago. Just brought his kid down to the game. There's a world where if you tell me that's that Brad Marchand makes his home in Boston, he lived there so much of his adult life, all of it to this point would kind of make sense. So, I don't think that anything's ruined here legacy wise. You know what I mean? Like I love the way Marchand answered the question. I don't know if you saw that clip, but
yeah,
I thought he was very articulate about it, very complimentary of Don Sweeney. Obviously, they didn't see eye to eye on the last important piece of business. But, I think there's a way forward for everyone beyond this. And now Brad Marchand, A, gets to go chase a Stanley Cup with one of the best teams in the league right now. B, gets to hit free agency this summer, potentially, if he doesn't resign in Florida and, chase whatever kind of contract he might get out there and get kind of a new lease on life with a team that maybe is going to be more competitive than where the Bruins are at.
Quick thing here. Love the ambient noise behind you. The bird talking as you're talking. Amazing, amazing background noise.
Oh my God, you can hear that?
Yeah, oh yeah, we can hear that. Oh, it's all good, man. No,
I'm quite literally chilling in the jungle right now, so I can't do much about the nature around me.
It's all good. It's all good. We're just considering it part of the scenery here. So to focus a little bit more on Boston, the fact that they I know, it's a topic switch. Well, not even really a topic switch, but like
no, I just love the. I didn't think you could hear that because I had my earphones in. I thought maybe that limited the scope of what ambient noise you're picking up. So
nah, it's totally cool. We'll probably not acknowledge it again at some point. But I'm just curious about what you think about this Bruins team now that they're venturing off with some of the younger pieces they've acquired, but this is fully, and I guess it's always been to a certain degree, David Pasternak's team, but like he is the focal point now. Like Brad Marchand, the guy, as long as he was, and then David Pastrnak obviously at the forefront too, but like he is the guy there. Like, what do you think of that era that they're venturing towards?
He's the guy, you're right. But to me, there's three guys, right? It's really him, McAvoy, and Swayman that are
Sorry, I should mention McAvoy and Swayman too, of course, but like, obviously, their featured player, they're the highest on player rankings. It's going to be Pasta
for sure, and he's paid like it too, right? That's part of the deal. That's what the money's for.
That's it.
But it must be weird for them because on one hand, of course, like they grew up. These are their buddies that are getting traded away that have been part of bringing them into the NHL. But on the other hand, like if you're the age of those guys, their careers won't last forever either. I mean, this is how brutal the sport can be. You might be deep down a little happy the organization's going to at least do this to give you a chance to have another run of great success, while you're still a productive player. And so I would say, honestly, with those three pillars that I mentioned, the whole operation hinges on them now because, and obviously McAvoy still out from his injury, that the Four Nations situation. It's been a tough year for Swayman. He got the contract he wanted, but he hasn't performed at the level that we've seen in the past. Could be all kinds of reasons for that, even starting with the fact that the negotiations stretched through camp and just a strange start to the season. Not to mention a goalie's performance is impacted, by how the team plays around him too, a little bit more than other players. So if this works, it will be because those players remain top players at their position, and then it gives the Bruins time to find younger guys to bring in around them. And so you're right. It's the David Pastrnak show. It's going to be the Charlie McAvoy show. I mean, look, they got Elias Lindholm, who's also missed a huge chunk of this season injured. I mean, that is the flip side. Like, we don't know what the Bruins of 2025, 26 look like yet. But even if you just factor in healthy McAvoy, healthy Lindholm, Swayman bounce back performance, Pastrnak, and they still have players, right? Like they have NHL players around those guys.
It's still a good team.
That's still a pretty good team. Like that's not draft lottery pick. Like this, that's not the situation in Boston. It really is a refresh, I think, versus, anything deeper than that. It's like when we had that conversation a few weeks ago about, the rebuild and how Columbus held on to Werenski. Well, like Boston is holding on to its version of that. It's holding on to the McAvoys. Like this isn't a full scale trade everybody off the roster. I mean, look, you could collect all kinds of nice draft picks if you wanted to trade healthy McAvoy and Pastrnak and all that, but it doesn't make any sense. I mean, you're then trying to draft those players, and those guys are still in their 20s, and they're still in a spot to help. Brad Marchand's turning 37. He had 3 surgeries last summer, and he had a really slow start to the season. Now, to his credit, he really picked it up, and his production's sort of back where you'd expect it to be. Top 20 goals again. He's basically been automatic 20 to 30 goal guy, and at his best up to 40 as an NHL player over a long period of time. But if you're Boston, you don't know what that aging curve looks like. There's 12 or 15 players his age any given season in the league, and I'm not predicting that he can't be one of them and that he won't have a productive a couple of years, but it's not a certainty. And you got this opportunity to get something back, and they took it. I mean, it was pure business, man. But it's not the kind of business. Hey, Boston sports fans aren't used to it, right? Their teams just seem to be good in every sport every year. Although the The Patriots, I guess, have challenged that in more recent times. But, they had a really great long run of success in that city. And, he's an icon. He's a team icon. And frankly, he's probably going to play for 2 more teams, I would think. Not because I know anything about his situation in Florida, but odds suggest just with Florida's cap situation, there's a chance he has a quick stop there and then hits free agency as well.
Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett together, the idea of them on a same line. Oh, I don't have a question there. I just want to laugh.
Well, and you remember the incident they were involved in last year's playoffs, right? I mean,
yes, they were.
And it's funny because they played on the same Canada Four Nations team too. Now that that team wasn't maybe playing in the alley as much as you might expect in a playoff series. I mean, just the caliber of hockey. There wasn't a lot. I mean, I know Bennett was involved in that fight in the 3-fight game against the USA, but it wasn't that kind of game. But you could just the Florida Panthers. Part of what's made them so good. I mean, they got lots of good players, but they are a tough team to play against, right? Like they're not afraid to take the odd game into the mud. And when it gets to playoffs, and they've embraced and popularized the style that's worked for them, and they've been to 2 straight finals. I mean, look at them right now. They have the team they have. They've won 8 of their last 10 games. They have Matthew Tkachuk on the sidelines till the playoffs. They got Brad Marchand for the foreseeable future on the sidelines. Now you got Aaron Ekblad out of the lineup. Like they already look as strong as they do, and they have 3 potential difference makers to come into the team. Now, the only caveat I'll put on that is it doesn't always work out like you hope when a player gets injured and you pop them in. Like sometimes that could disrupt things. So like there's obviously this comes with no guarantees, but on paper, when healthy, that's as good a team as you got in the league. And they've already shown you in the last 2 years that they kind of have the mental makeup and they have the experience level where they can endure a long playoff run. And so they're trying to make it 3 in a row down there in South Florida.
Any added insight you'd like to add on Aaron Ekblad? You just mentioned being suspended 20 games for a PED violation.
Yeah, very unusual situation, right? It's been 7-8 years since Nate Schmidt had a similar one back when he was with Vegas. Ironically, Nate now a member of the Florida Panthers. At the time, Nate mentioned I think it was tainted meat that had in some way had led to his. Aaron Ekblad put out a statement from the NHLPA saying that he had taken something while dealing with injuries that was not team approved, and that's where his violation, came up. But for one reason or another, it's so strange to see these kind of violations in hockey. 20 games is a pretty significant, unpaid leave, we'll call it, from a team. It obviously takes them out of the mix for the remainder of the regular season and a couple playoff games. And that's kind of all I know about it. It's not one where, I think a player made a mistake. He's owned up to his mistake and, he's got to sit out the next 6 weeks and jump back into playoff hockey at some point in time. But, the Panthers aren't in any sort of cap trouble as a result of the suspension. And they will have a pretty good right shot defenseman. I mean, it certainly makes the acquisition of Seth Jones a little more important in the short term for Florida. That was obviously that's a longer time frame horizon kind of decision, but it does give them another righty that can log the kind of minutes that Ekblad does, and that's kind of where I'm at with that one. But I don't know why. I've always sort of wondered, because you imagine that there are players out there that are looking for every edge, right? When it comes to taking either supplements or, and the other thing is I think with all sort of performance enhancing drugs, it's not always just about building muscle per se. It can be about recovery, right? Like when you're going through injuries, because obviously athletes struggle with that, and the longer time you're injured, you can't be building up whatever fitness that you need to be elite in your sport, and so. It's always been a bit of a curiosity just how few players have actually been suspended for that. But, it's a pretty big price to pay. And for Ekblad, it comes right before he's a pending UFA, too.
Yeah.
It takes him out of the mix. And as I say, just sometimes a player leaves the lineup and then comes back. He's going to be jumping back into the playoffs whenever he plays again. That can be doesn't guarantee team success, I guess, because sometimes that there's a disruptive nature to that. And in this case, you've got Tkachuk in the same spot, and we don't know when we're going to see him exactly. We don't know what version of him he'll be. So in theory, this is set up for another Panthers run, but there's also some challenges built into that.
Oh, one more Brad Marchand thing. Have you seen the Samuel Adams commercial, the collab he has with the brewery?
Yeah, I just saw it yesterday. Yeah.
Hilarious. When did I know Brad Marchand was always a character, but it feels like only in recent months, he's been this really hilarious. Like the behind the scenes footage we've seen of him at the Four Nations, and then his comedic chops in that commercial. There's a whole other level for this guy. This guy's really entertaining.
Yeah, if you look at his whole career arc, right? He really was the ultimate kind of rat pest, whatever you want to think of, early in his career. Was suspended a bunch of times back then for various incidents, was never that repentant, could be kind of glib in the media. I mean, I would say we're on to multiple years now where he's thoughtful, really well-spoken. He became the captain of the Bruins. I think he grew up essentially over time to, for lack of a better way to put it. I found dealing with him in the last few seasons unreal. He was, I think I mentioned this, but they anointed him Team Canada's media MVP, the PR staff did at Four Nations, because literally every day he would just sit there for 20, 30 minutes, wave after wave of interview. Obviously, when that tournament shifted to Boston, it started in Montreal, with him being a Bruin, there's a lot more focus on him from the local reporters, and he literally every single day put in a long shift there, which, isn't necessarily asking too much, but not every player is comfortable doing that. And I just think he's just comfortable being himself. He's someone in his own skin. Even remember earlier in the year, there was that radio report about him and Pasternak being at war.
I remember that.
Do you remember that scrum he did? He just went right at it, didn't shy away. I don't know. I think that I really do think he's a very forthright guy to deal with. I think he's got to a stage in his life where he's got perspective. He's thoughtful, and as usually happens for players in your career that in their NHL careers, that they might start off, you don't necessarily, you don't see a lot of value in interviewing them. If you hang around the league long enough, usually you've got some wisdom, right? And I just think he's kind of a wise guy having fun, doesn't take any of this too seriously. I actually found, it's funny, I wish I leaned into it harder. He did a scrum the day before the final at TD Garden at the Four Nations, and he's just talking about, I got the sense that he knew it might be his last ever big game in that building, basically. He was just talking about what it meant to get a chance to play a game like that they don't come around so often. But it was more than cliches. There's some depth to what he was saying, and I was thinking, man, this guy knows maybe he's getting traded also in 2 weeks. Could be his last big moment. Essentially, I know he's not wearing Bruins colors there. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he is dealt. But I found he was very introspective in that time. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I hope he's healthy again soon and look forward to future interviews. And I thought he did a good job with that beer commercial, too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the interviews from him in the playoffs with the Florida Panthers. Great work on assess. Oh, yeah, that's going to be amazing. Just with what we've been able to see from the Four Nations to now, that's going to be the whole meet. You talk about a media MVP between him and Paul Maurice in Florida. That's going to be some fun.
We might get another Panthers Leaf series. So, at this point, it could be, there could be a lot of different variations of what it looks like, but it wouldn't be surprising at some point if Florida and Toronto play another playoff series. So selfishly, I wouldn't mind having Marchand be part of the spectacle this time around.
I'm wondering if we're getting Panthers Senators in the first round. That could be very interesting. Go. I'm very into that idea. Look, Leafs Sens first round, everyone eats off that first round. We would go ham on that. But if it's a Senators Panthers first round, of course the Senators have to make it. Looks like they will. I'm not going to complain too hard about traveling from Ottawa to Florida to cover that series, Tkachuk versus Tkachuk.
The direct flights, that's always my first thought, but
yeah, I got to make sure about those.
Are there? Do you know?
I haven't looked that far into it yet.
I can tell you from experience, there are no direct flights from Edmonton to Florida.
No. Plenty of money burned from that. Can I get your thoughts on? I know we've talked about this topic before, but the NHL rookie race and where you think it's at right now. Like, I know you've been on vacation mode, but
I was going to say I don't know where it's at right now. I've been 3 days out of the loop here.
I mean, I think even if you're 3 days out of the loop, I'm still curious. I still think you've seen enough of these guys for long enough to maybe factor an opinion, but like totally cool if you want to plead the fifth and pass the question on to next week.
Yeah, let's pass the question on. Just because I feel like if we're going to address it, I should look at it like I was looking at a ballot today or something like that, and I have not looked at it closely enough. I haven't looked at it closely enough to give an informed answer, and then I'm going to say something half-cocked, and half the people, someone out there is going to be a Lane Hudson fan and is going to think I'm an idiot, or a Dustin Wolf fan, or
I don't want you to look like an idiot. I don't want you to look like an idiot. No.
I mean, what's great is there are lots of there's real debate there. There's positional debate, which is unusual, right? I mean, let's face it, the NHL Rookie of the Year award, the Calder Trophy, tends to go to forwards. I mean, historically, it's overwhelmingly been a forwards award, but this year you've got an interesting goaltender and an interesting defenseman among the forwards. And so there's a little bit more depth to the debate, I think, because you're not just comparing, hey, which forward had the most goals or the most points? In this case, you're trying to argue who had the biggest impact on his team playing different roles. And yeah, so let's actually do a little bit of research before I wade into that pool.
I love the fact that also for those who are not familiar, we love to discuss show ideas while we're actually doing the show. I love the idea of us both kind of doing some research and then maybe putting together a ballot. I'm going to write that down for a future idea. Maybe if we could do that next week or whenever we feel necessary to do it. That'd be a great idea.
Yeah, well, we should do it next week or I'll forget about it. So
we'll make sure of it. Do you want to tackle some questions? I know we didn't get to it on Monday, but we did get some fans to send in some questions over Discord, Twitter, and I think there are some on Blue Sky. So I'll get you a couple. Charlie wants to know, how did you become an insider? Is there a specific career path? How was the grind to acquiring sources? Do insiders vouch and share info with each other?
So, I mean, I don't think there is a true path, because certainly my story, and I'm happy to share it in some form, like I don't know that someone else could be sitting at home who's maybe young and wanting to do this and copy what I did, just because the industry has shifted so much. But I would say that broadly, the way to do it is somehow get your foot in the door, which I realize is the hardest part. There's probably someone out there listening right now going like, yeah, sure, CJ, I'm sitting here. I want to do what you do, but that is the hardest part. In my case, I went to Ryerson Journalism School at the time. It's called Toronto Metropolitan University now in downtown Toronto. At that point, it had, arguably the best journalism program in Canada. Carleton also had a known one at that point in time. I know even this, I don't even know what schools now offer journalism in Canada, but I know it's more. Like, there are more choices now than there was then. I always wanted to be a hockey writer. But at that point in time in Canada, there was no like sports specific journalism programs that exists now. And so, I went to university and got a job at the Canadian Press, which is a national wire service. And from that point, from when I was 18, basically, I was working 3 days a week, 3 nights a week at that job. And I was in the industry, right? And then eventually that progressed where I got to go cover a Leafs game. And then I got to go cover every Leafs home game. And obviously you start the process of getting to know people. As for how do you actually do it? First of all, you have to want to do it, because it doesn't really happen by accident. And then the other way is, if you want to do it and you're already kind of, so let's say a journalist, or you're someone who's around covering the game, then you got to meet people, because at the end of the day, the whole thing is built on having people trust you, having people tell you things. And, that just takes time. At the end, there's kind of no way around that aspect of it. You have to proactively, phone people, set up meetings. When you're, I would say this: if you're a young person who's already in press boxes regularly, I would try to meet everyone in that press box I could. I mean, even you're getting a coffee at the back of the press box at the intermission, and there's a scout there. Just introduce yourself. It doesn't mean the next day that guy's telling you about a trade, but over time, just the more people you know, obviously, the more information comes through your phone or comes to you. And so there's Unfortunately, like most things, I don't think that there's not a do A, do B, do C, do D, and you wind up where you want to be. But I think broadly, you have to get in the industry, you have to build up a reputation, you have to get to know people, and then you have to really want to do it. You have to be proactive. You have to think about where news comes from. You have to try to get news. Not everyone, there's all kinds of different skill sets of people who do the jobs that Julian and I do. Some people are excellent at breaking down a hockey game. Like some people are watching and they're looking with an expertise that's not that far off, the coaches or people that do that for a living. Some people like I think one of my strengths has always been understanding how the CBA works, how the rules of the league work, because that's where stories come from, in a sense. If you understand how the rules work, you understand what's got to happen in certain situations. And so anyway, that's a really long answer. I don't have, do insiders share information amongst each other? I mean, yes and no. Obviously there's a high degree of wanting to protect the people that tell you information. So, if I was betraying that trust too often with the people that, that share their info with me, that they'd probably stop sharing their info with me. So, certainly, I work with Pierre Lebrun and Darren Drager at TSN. We share things we're hearing, but, I think we're very careful not to be like, this person told me this. Like it's a little, I think you got to be careful there is the best way to put it. But certainly, obviously we talk, we compare notes. And oftentimes we're working on stories together. We're piecing together little bits of info and trying to form the whole picture.
Love that answer. From Corleos, is Jack Roslovic the biggest winner in the Mikko Rantanen trade? Gave up his number for 14 games, got a Rolex, and watch and other items in exchange after the trade, gets his number back.
I love that he went immediately back to it. I saw Walt Ruff, who's the team reporter for the Hurricanes, tweet literally the next day after trade deadline. It's like, yep, Jack Roslovic's back wearing 96. Mm-hmm. He must be the biggest winner. I mean, look, that set of transactions has been so churned over, kicked around. I don't think that the Hurricanes were a loser in it, quite honestly, but certainly individually, I mean, Mikko Rantanen's a pretty big winner in essence too. I mean, man signs a $96 million contract. I know there was some upheaval involved, but he did pretty well for himself and still ended up a place he wanted to be. Maybe not in the way he wanted to end up there, but that's how life goes. But I mean, getting a Rolex for giving up your number for 6 weeks and then just jumping right back into the old threads like it never happened. It's a pretty good transaction right there.
How much for a Rolex nowadays? That's not in my tax bracket right now.
I have no idea. I could appreciate a nice watch, but I'm not a watch guy. But it's like enough that probably every NHL player could afford one, but it might be so much that some of the guys not making the big tickets would want to go buy one, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I think in my mind is 10 to 15 grand. I might be way off. I know some watches are six figures. I know some watches are there like 100 grand or whatever, but it won't surprise you to know, Julian, I'm not a fashionista. So I'm not, we need like Sean McKenzie or someone on this pod to get the real answers on that.
Sean McKenzie, I would definitely love to know. He could do that. I've seen him put on some fits. Fits.
I traveled with Sean for years when I was covering the Leafs on the road. And the one thing about him, it's not that he owned but he knew about all the nice stuff, right? Like he would, a player would come to the podium and be like, "Oh, did you see that shirt? That's $1,500." He just knew. He knew. And his dad, Bob McKenzie, of course, used to call him the luxury consultant. He just knew of all the nice stuff. And so that's why, even if Sean himself doesn't have a Rolex, he may or may not, I don't know, he would know he could answer that question in thorough detail about the cost.
For those wondering, no relation. From Jaideep, what was on the lunch menu at TSN this year? Inquiring minds need to know. Yeah, it was the same kind of decision making. There was, I'd say, 5 or 6 lunch options. I went for the buffalo chicken wrap with salad. It was actually very good. And I'm only aware of one time where I got spotted in the background on camera eating. Yeah,
but it's
I saw the video. Someone shared a video of you chopping in the background. I was like, oh man, no.
There's no okay. Here's the problem that I have to explain. You have to eat like we have to eat at that spot because you don't know when they're going to throw to us. Like it's a bit of a, and I will say this: I'm not as good. Like when I'm in the studio, like once you get there, you kind of forget when we're on air or not. Like I'm not aware of really what's going on. Like I'm aware of what's happening at the insider's desk there. We're sharing info. We're trying to get things, blah, 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 blah. But you forget when you're on camera, like in the background, like you just don't think of it. And so anyway, somehow like the veterans beside me, like Dregs doesn't get caught eating. He knows when he can like bite into whatever he's eating, but I've been caught 2 years in a row now. But buffalo chicken wrap with salad was my choice. I had the breakfast sandwich in the morning. Got to say the catering was top tier this year. It was a fun day in studio. We had Mark Giordano in there. I don't know if you saw his bits, but I thought he did really well in his kind of first kick at doing the TV thing too.
The bit where he is doing the defensive thing, he's like I think it was standing for noodles. Yeah, the blocking. Yeah, just blocking everything. That was really well done.
I love the one where he's blocking the shot, like where they, like he's just like standing there. Man, like I think James Duthie is one of the minds behind a lot of those things. Like obviously there's a team that puts those together, but they're just really clever with coming up with that stuff. Like that was really good.
From John R. It's a weird question. For Julian and CJ. Julian and CJ can no longer work in sports in any way. You have to start a new career tomorrow. Here's the catch. Julian chooses for CJ, and CJ chooses for Julian. How much you earn doesn't matter. Your needs are comfortably met. What new jobs do you now have?
Oh, man.
Yeah, this is a weird one.
Did you think about this in advance? Like, do you know what you're going to say for me?
I see you as like a firefighter for some reason. I don't know why I see you like putting out fires, like working for like your local fire station and going out on calls at whatever time of day you're needed, and you're putting out fires.
Funny, I was thinking for you something like school teacher, like something where you're working with kids, like you got such great energy and like a positive influence on people. Like, I don't know if it'd be school teacher, but something like that. I think would fit your kind of your vibe.
I like that.
Yeah. So I'll go with school teacher. I was trying to think of like, I don't know, like camp counselor, but that's maybe it's just something where you're positively influencing people in your community. I think that would be the right fit.
That'd be cool. My grandmother was a teacher, and my dad does some teaching. So that would be a cool way to follow into the
It's like the family business.
That's basically that. It's basically that. Daniel Burt wants to know, start, bench, cut, tropical drinks edition, pina colada, daiquiri, Mai Tai. Start, bench, cut.
I'm starting the Mai Tai.
Okay. All right.
What was the first one? Pina colada, and what was the other one?
Daiquiri.
Benching the daiquiri, cutting the pina colada.
I haven't had enough Mai Tais in my life.
I'm going to say this, and I'm not a huge tropical drinks person.
Yeah.
Like I stick largely to sort of beers and wine, like generally. Like I will have a mixed drink, but I'm not one that's like ordering a fancy cocktail every time I go to a nice restaurant or something. So that my point is I hear all of those and none of those like really excite me that much. Mai Tai is good though. I'd have Mai Tai.
Yeah, I don't know have I ever had a Mai Tai? I don't know if I've ever had one. Like a pina colada I've had, daiquiris I've had, but like I don't know if I've ever. I'm not like a big like tropical drinks guy either, so maybe I guess I don't know. I guess that's why I can't form my own opinion on the tropical drink side of things. So it's
you know what's great though? Since I'm on my last full day of vacation in a tropical location, I could acquire any or all of those today pretty easily. I think.
You could just do a taste. If in a different world, you're doing the podcast at a bar, and you could do a live drink test for us.
Well, it's 7:45 in the morning here right now, so maybe a little soon. But I will say, once I'm done with this, my workday is done for the day.
Man.
So,
all right. Well, let's get you to the end of your workday as fast as we can here. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. And Siege, great work as always, my man.
Yeah, I don't know if we can call that a full workday, can we?
I mean, you worked a little bit.
A little bit.
You worked a little bit. It's all good.
Wasn't too stressful.
Nah, we try to be stress-free as we can around here. We'll be back next week. CJ will be back from the beach by then, and we'll go through more great storylines. And hey, you know what? Maybe we will talk more about the Calder Trophy race, among other things in the NHL world.
Yeah, you just want to start an argument and give...
No! I genuinely wanted to know your thoughts, because I saw people were talking about it.
You want to give our admin at the SDPN some clips where they can have Habs fans mad at me or Flyers fans or what have you.
I feel like fans are going to be mad regardless. Let's at least have them be mad at both of us.
I'll say this. When it comes to these decisions, sometimes there can be, like, it's not a right and wrong all the time. But
sure. You know,
can you really go wrong if any of the players emerges as the winner? Like that would be my counter argument. But again, I haven't dug into the numbers. I want to look at the historical. I want to make sure I'm giving you an informed opinion by the time I'm sharing that opinion on who it should be.
Well, we're definitely going to delve into that because I still think it's a worthwhile discussion to have. And we're definitely going to do it again when we get closer to actually, you know, the time for us to put together our ballots. But oh yeah, this is definitely something we're going to revisit.
Right on. Who's going to make the playoffs in the West?
Vancouver got that win over Calgary on Wednesday. I wonder if they're going to be that team to do it. But also,
you got 5 weeks. I don't know.
It's a lot of time, man. It's a lot of time. Like
you already said, the Senators are in the East. So
I mean, I said it looks like they're going to make it.
I caught that line.
It looks like they're going to make it. It looks like they're going to make it. They've reached the point now where it's either they're going to make it, or if they don't make it, it's a collapse. And I mean, I'm excited to cover that story either way. It's been really interesting to be around this Ottawa Senators team.
This is a long time ago, and I'm certainly not predicting this for Ottawa or any team. But I covered a version of the Maple Leafs that lost 7 games in a row from it being in a playoff spot in March. That was when Brian Burke said after the season it was like an 18-wheeler going off the cliff, if you remember that line.
I remember
that line. My point is like for all these teams that don't have that much margin for error, like a big losing streak could be around the corner just because the pressure of each game builds and the tough league. So anyway, I'm just having fun with you, my man.
I know you're having fun. The point of the show is that.
Remember how many times have I said I don't have a crystal ball? I'm like, maybe you have a crystal ball. Like you just know who's going to be in. You could save us all the trouble.
I just follow the percentages that Dom Luszczyszyn puts up at the Athletic. That's as far as it goes for me. That's why I felt so certain. Apparently,
let's dial up some percentages that gets us a Battle of Ontario because I think the hockey would be great. I think the excitement or the interest in that series would be great, and it would bring us together for some live CJ shows in the same city, one way or another, your city or mine. But it'd be good.
I'll have to find a way to find a studio that works for us in Ottawa. Maybe the Canadian Tire Center. It's probably going
to be a broom closet at the Canadian Tire Center.
Ian Mendes is just going to find us some spot. He'll take care of us. I'm sure of it. This is a long epilogue to our podcast ending, I should say. Just getting to the Battle of Ontario.
That's because you're getting like my just disorganized views here from vacation.
And no sunglasses either. It's a shame. We did not get the sunglasses this year, Siege.
Well, they could come out at any point. I mean, just because I'm back from vacation doesn't mean I'm going to be dug in the next few weeks.
Okay, well, we'll have to wait for that next time. All right, we're out of here. We'll talk to you guys next week.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.